All right, so let's get into it. If everyone, make sure you have that downloaded. Everyone got that? Steward downloads on Game Dev Club. Yes, no? Working on it? All right, so now we're gonna, oh yeah, that's what I was forgetting. Gotta plug it in so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Perfect. All right, so open up Unity. So if you have the newer versions of Unity, you probably have this Unity hub. What you do when you come here is just click New. It'll give you a few different options for how to create a new one. This option doesn't actually change what you can do with it, but it changes the defaults. So if you do 2D, it's going to automatically give you a 2D view of everything. If you do 3D, it's going to give you a 3D, and you'll have a light already in the scene so that you don't have to add your own light to see things. So we want to do 2D for this one because we're using pixel art. We're doing a top-down. And name it whatever you want. Intro to Unity, roguelike or something. And then you just click create. I already did that for the sake of the recording, so I'm just gonna go to the one I already created. And that will probably take you anywhere between a minute and 5 minutes, depending on how good your computer is. But for those of you that are already here, go to Assets. We're gonna get those assets that we already downloaded and put them in here. So go to Assets, Import Package, and Custom Package. Actually, I don't think we downloaded that, so we're gonna download that right now. So now that you're in Unity project, go to Assets, Import Package, Custom Package, and find where that package is. For me, it's in Downloads because I just downloaded it. Open that. And here you'll see all the assets that are in that package. You can see I have 4 different scripts, and then a bunch of different PNGs, which are sprites. I want to import all of these, so I'm going to leave them all checked. But if I wanted to, say, only take one theme of sprites, I would just uncheck that, or if I wanted to ignore one of these, I could easily do that. And when you're exporting, it's almost the exact same thing. All right, so now we're in here. You'll automatically, with Unity, you will automatically be given a scene. You can think of a scene as kind of like a level, per se, although you can also have a separate scene for like your menu or something like that. It automatically generates a scene for you with a camera so that when you hit play, you can see whatever's in the view of the camera. Right now it's nothing because we haven't put anything in there, but yeah. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a player. So in order to do that, we're gonna right-click over under this sample scene here and create a new sprite. So go to Create, 2D Object, and Sprite. And we're going to call it Player. So this sprite, you'll see right over here is the sprite render. It does not have any sprite in it. We're gonna find a sprite to put into it. I'm going to click under sprites. You can do either theme. You can use anything you want for the player icon. I'm going to use this astronaut under the space theme. And all I have to do is drag it right into this box up here. And now you'll see our sprite actually has a image attached to it, and it appears at 0, 0. And if I were to click play, the camera can now see that sprite, and it's stationary. Can't move or anything yet because we haven't added a script to it, but it's there. Are there any questions so far? Everyone following? All right, cool.
You can use any, those images, we obviously gave them to you, but you can just throw in like your own image. If you have pixel art,
explain that, yeah.
Yeah, maybe just drag in an image.
So, if you have pixel art, you can just put Unity on half of your screen and say this was the pixel art. I could just drag it over and drag all of my pixel art into here, whether it be in a folder or on its own. You can drag all your pixel art and just
drag it. That's an image, I guess.
This?
No, paper 64. Oh. Yeah.
Am I blind? Oh yeah, yeah. You can just do this. Like, we got an image. We can make this image our sprite if we wanted, or not.
And what's that little toggle?
So this is the difference between a sprite and a sprite sheet. Each one of these little things is a sprite, but you can actually, a lot of times what people do is they make a sprite sheet out of all these. So a sprite sheet might have all the different animations for a character on it. It would have more than just one thing here when you click the arrow. And a lot of times you can go in, or if it's a sprite sheet, you can go in and you can use the sprite editor to split it up into different sections. We're not going to worry about that today, but so now we're going to add well, let's go over this sprite render a little bit. We also can do some different things with it. If we want to flip it, we can click either of these flips. Want an upside down astronaut, we can easily just flip the sprite upside down. And you can imagine how right now this doesn't really make sense, but say in the game there's a button you click to change gravity. You also want to change the sprite to go upside down, so you could just find this in code and have a script change this Y to be true instead of false. So, cool stuff. The rest of this doesn't matter too much for sprites. We'll get to tiled in a little bit when we're doing the walls and floor. So now we want our little guy to move. So there's two different ways we can do this. We can either come do scripts and take movement and drag it into here. The other thing we can do is we can click on add component and type in movement, which is a script that was in the asset package, and add it in. So now we can give it, we'll see this script has a couple different options on it that we purposely put in there. So we just set the speed to 5 and see what happens when we play. We can now actually move our guy around. And you can even go off the camera. So now we got our movement script added to our player. and works pretty well. So, probably a good time to explain. Unity is made up of a scene, or different scenes, and these scenes contain game objects. For example, this player is a game object, and each game object is made up of a bunch of different components. In this one, we have the transform, which is on most every game object that you'll have, and transform is just the position, rotation, and scale. So if we play around with this a bit, you can see if we change the Y position to 2, he goes up 2. If we change the X position to 2, or -5, or he'll move over. And it's a good way to, rather than dragging it over here, you'll notice it changes, but it doesn't go to an exact number. So if you move it to about where you want to go, but you want it to be exactly 5 and exactly -1, you can do that after moving it around to see where you want it to go. And the same thing applies for scale and rotation. You'll notice I'm not touching the Z at all because we're only doing a 2D game, and Z is the third dimension that we don't really need to worry about because it is 2D. Then we also have a sprite render. That's why we have an image, and the script lets us move. So that's what makes up this one game object. So now let's add in some floors so that our guy isn't all alone here. He has something to walk on. So so we can do this 2 ways. Do it the way we did last time, where we go right click over here, create 2D sprite, or if we want to do a shortcut, we can find the sprite and just drag it over into the sample scene, and it'll automatically create that sprite with this sprite attached to it. So in this case, it's a floor. Now, you guys realize the floor is in front of our player right now, which is not ideal, unless you're playing Super Mario World and hiding behind the background. But we want to make sure that that floor is behind everything. So we're going to add in a sorting layer. So the sprite render has a default sorting layer. It's already set to that. But we can add a new one, and by clicking this little plus here, and we'll just call this sorting layer floor. And we also want to add a sorting layer for the player. So that way our player appears above the floor. So now when we click into floor, we can click on sorting layer and choose the floor layer, and when we click on player, we can choose the player sorting layer. And I'm pretty sure the further down it is on this, the closer it is to you. So if you want to move it, you can move it like this. You'll see the floor now appears ahead of the player. We want the player to appear first, so we'll do that. And so on. So now we got a little floor tile there. Doesn't move, doesn't do anything, but it's there. And we want to make sure, so now we want to extend this floor so it's not just one tile, right? And we could do that by copy-pasting this and changing it to be 1, and then doing that, however many times we want to, hundreds of times. That's not the best way to do it. One of the easier ways to do it, though, is to use tiling on sprite render. So over here we have draw mode, simple, sliced, tiled. For tiling, if we click tiled, you'll see a couple different things, new options appear. Right now we're continuous is the default tile mode. So let's see if we want to make it a width, I don't know, 5. We now have a 5 by 5 for the tile, which seems to work pretty well. Looks pretty nice. Yep, so on your floor game object, under sprite render component, there is the draw mode and there is tiled. And once you click on tiled, some new options will show up. And that width and height is what you want to change. Now be careful, a lot of times you want to go in and say, if you wanted to make this 5 times bigger, or say I want to make it twice as big as it is now, I might just think, oh, let's double the scale. But that doesn't quite do what we want, because the scale is not the same thing as the tile. So we want to make sure that when we're doing this, we're adjusting the tile height and width and not the scale height and width, unless you actually want your tiles squares to be twice as big or half as big. A lot of times, the text you see will be 2D, like shown on a canvas, whereas everything behind it is 3D. So you just kind of have a canvas of the text you see in front of the 3D game. So there are definitely cases where it's used. Now something interesting here, if we do like 4.25, you'll notice it gets cut off on the edge here, which doesn't look bad with this particular sprite, but you can imagine with some sprites it looks really bad if you just cut it off in half. So Unity actually has a built-in option to handle this. It's the adaptive mode. And if you click on it, it will automatically adapt it so that it fits exactly, or it just stretches or pulls depending on whether you're too far over or too far under where you're at. And this stretch value, what it does is it determines the cutoff. So right now it's 0.5, so if we do 0.49, you'll see it's only 4 wide, but if we do 0.5, or 0.51, now it's above the cutoff, so it's 5 wide. If we change this cutoff to be above 4.51, you'll notice it goes back down to 4. So we can just leave that at 5. We probably don't need to do any different amounts anyways. And I kind of want this floor to just go on forever, so I'll just do 50 by 50. So we can make as big of a map as we want, and the floor will still be under us. We won't see the blue darkness beyond it. Alright, so now we got a floor. Works pretty well. You can walk around on it. But now we want to add in some walls, so we can do a very similar thing that we did with floors, but with walls. And take the wall, the sprite, move it over. And now we can do the same thing where we tile it We can move the position, so let's say move it to 10 or something, and then put the height to 10. So now we have a wall that's 10 high. Which is as tall as our camera. We also want to make sure that the sorting layer is its own sorting layer, because we don't, although with walls we shouldn't have anything walking over it anyways. It's good to be safe. So it makes sense that the wall's in front of the floor, but maybe behind the player, so if the player ever goes through the wall. That one you can change around a bit, doesn't matter as much. But you'll see, we definitely just walk right through the wall. That's not a very good wall. Just looks like another tiling on the floor. So we're gonna add in some hitboxes so that we can actually collide with the wall. So let's start with the player. Add a hitbox on the player. So we're gonna go to, click on the player in the sample scene, and add a component called 2D box collider, or box collider 2D. And this is just a hitbox for the player. And now, if you click on this edit collider, you can actually see where the collider is around the player. So because this particular image is kind of smaller than it says it is, you will see the default hitbox is much taller than the actual character. It'd be kind of silly if we hit our head on something when we were that far away. So we can shrink it down and make it probably a little bit smaller than our character. And shrink these sides too. So that way our hitbox is a little bit smaller than we are, which makes it a bit more enjoyable, because it feels fair. So now I can exit out of editing the collider. If you want, you can touch up these numbers. I'm not going to bother, but if you play it, you'll still realize that you can walk right through it. So it's still not hitting the wall. That makes sense because your collider only registers other colliders. So while the player has a hitbox, the wall doesn't have a hitbox yet. So now we want to add a hitbox to our wall. So on our wall, we're going to do the same thing. Add component, add box collider 2D, and for the sake of looking at this, I'm going to change it back to 1. We'll see perfectly fits around it. Don't really need to change that one at all. So that looks good. And you'll still see we walk right through it. So right now, there's two things. They register that they see each other, or they register that they're colliding with each other, but there's no physics involved with it at all, so it doesn't actually push you back, and you can just walk right through it. So we're going to add some physics components to them, and the physics components are called rigid bodies. So go to the player, add component, and add rigid body 2D. And you'll see there's all kinds of different options for the rigid body because there's a lot you can do with the physics. And we do the same to the wall, add rigid body 2D, we should, now that they both have rigid bodies and box colliders, they both fall because there's physics that I may or may not have forgotten about. So there should be a gravity scale that we can quickly change to 0 because this is a top-down, not a platformer, in which we might want gravity for our player, but not our wall. And we can change this on both of these to be 0. So now when we play, the gravity scale is set to 0. We can easily just walk over, and you'll see I can actually collide with it now. But the wall doesn't quite work how we want it to still. It doesn't do a very good job as a wall. It does a pretty good job as like a box or something. Yeah. Yes. You'll find yourself wasting so much time playing with the smallest concept of a game. So now we have our wall that's actually a box, and we need to figure out how can we prevent it from moving. Well, there's a really easy way to do that. Right now it's set to dynamic body type, but if we just switch it over to a static body type, it would automatically assume that there's no gravity applied to it, and when we click play, go to it, it doesn't move. Our player can try as hard as he wants, but he cannot get through it at all. That's actually something we added into the movement script, so.
I thought it had charm, so I kept it. If you want to have more fun, just a little diversion. Go to the player, go to the movement script, and find the rotation modifier. And put in some whatever you want.
Does this multiply it, or does it just add?
Yeah, 3's too little. Put like 10.
Oh god, I'm just moving. Alright. So this is how you play with Ben's script to rotate the player around. Lots of fun. I am trying not to sit here and play with it while I'm leading a workshop. So now we have our wall, but you'll see if we go to tile it again, so if we set it to height 10 again, you'll see the box collider is still only that small little bit. So if we play, we walk over, you can walk right through the wall unless you hit that one untiled box collider. So the collider is still thinking it's not tiled at all. So what we have to do for that is we go into this box collider and enable auto tiling. And now you'll see this box collider encompasses the entire wall and not just that one little bit. So now if we were to play it, it doesn't matter where you go on the wall, you won't be able to go into it. So you'll notice our camera right now isn't doing a very good job because we can go wherever the heck we want and it just chills, which is alright for some games. Like if you wanted to play Binding of Isaac, it's a great example of a game that doesn't have a moving camera. But it would be really nice if the camera followed our player, at least while we're doing this. So what we're going to do is do exactly that. We're gonna have the main camera follow the player. So click on the main camera, drag it onto the player. What this does is it makes the camera a child of the player. So in more technical terms, the player's transform, whatever this is set to, will be the default for the main camera's transform. So if the player is at position 50, then the camera is at position 50 plus whatever this is. So if I did, 5 or 05, the player would be at 50, and then the camera would be at 55 because it has the 5 from the player and then 5y from the camera transform. So it adds them all together. And now that this is underneath the player, when we move around, camera will follow us. There's a lot more cool stuff you can do with camera movement. Oh God.
Yeah, now you might want to be careful about that rotation.
Didn't think about that. But there's a lot more cool stuff you can do with it. You can make sure it doesn't rotate like that, but we aren't going to get into that today. So you might say, why not add some more walls so we can actually encompass the whole level and have it boxed in so the player can't just keep walking off into oblivion. So if we want to make more walls, we could just do copy paste. It works. We now have 2 of them. We can move it around, do whatever. Or we could undo that and we could create a prefab. What a prefab is it's a blueprint. So we can create a prefab or blueprint. I'm actually going to make a whole folder for it. So that when we want to make more, we can just copy the blueprint rather than copying one of these pre-existing walls. So in order to make this a blueprint, we just drag it over into the folder prefabs. You'll also see that it's now blue instead of white up here because it is a prefab. And we can actually click on the prefab itself, and this is different from the instance of the object. And whatever we change in the prefab will actually change all of the copies of this blueprint in our scene. So if we wanted to, now we have this wall here, we can set it to go around us a bit, make a few more walls, and I'm just gonna make them surround the player. Box, nothing special. Nope. So now if we play, we move around, and we're completely surrounded in by all these walls. But all I had to do was move 4 walls and tile them, as opposed to doing 100 walls, little squares all the way around, or stretching out the sprite so that it looked funky. And if I wanted to change something about these, say I wanted to make them twice as big, I could just change the prefab, and that will actually change all of them to be twice as big. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to undo it. But if I just wanted to change a single instance of this, I could also, obviously each instance has its own location. You can also set the scale different on each one. You can add new things to these children of the prefabs without breaking it, and it will still be changed when you change the prefab. Any questions about that? All right. So I'm actually going to make everything we've made so far. So the player and the floor, both prefabs as well, so that if we make a new level, we already have these saved, and we can just copy the floor and the player over rather than having to remake them or copy them individually. And we can just change it in one spot, and it'll change it in every level. So now we want to weigh, so what's the goal again, right? Right now we're just walking around, whatever. But we can add an objective. So I'm going to use this hatch sprite, little hatch. I'm going to add it in somewhere here. And I'm going to give this hatch the component for the exit. So we have an exit script that's already written out. You can click on it. You can add the component this way, or you can drag the component over from the scripts into the hatch game object. And you'll see here it prompts us for the next level. Right now, we just want it to, we can just restart our level because we don't have any other level to go to. So we want to say whatever our scene name is and type it in. So right here our scene name is sample scene. So type that in exactly, case sensitive. And what this will do is when it registers you as hitting the exit, it will restart the scene. Or it'll load a new scene that is exactly the same as this one was when it started. So if we do this, you'll notice we can play it and try to get to it. Doesn't do anything. Do we know why it doesn't do anything? No box collider. Exactly. It doesn't know that you're actually hitting it because it doesn't have any way to speak with you. So we're going to add that box collider 2D again to it. And there are different box colliders. There's circle ones and whatnot, but for simplicity, we can just stick to the square ones for today. And you'll still realize that when we go over it, it doesn't quite do what we want it to do. This is really funky. It's not actually registering that we're hitting it, or like we're going to the next level, because it's just blocking us out instead. So what we want to accommodate for this is to add a trigger. So up to this point, all the box colliders we've created are box colliders that are meant to hit into something and like use physics to push yourself off or push that thing somewhere. But we can also use box colliders as like zones to trigger an event. So what this is called is a trigger box collider. So it's actually the same as the previous box collider. So we're going to add another box collider to the player. Another 2D box collider. Want to edit it again, make sure it's about the right size. And then we want to check this is trigger. And what this does is it makes it so that it ignores all of the physics aspects of it, and it can be used by the scripts, which the exit script is already written out. But what the exit script is doing is it's checking did the box collider that just entered this, is that a trigger? And if it is, it'll check the tag. So we want to go up to the player tag, change it to player. It'll check the tag and see if that tag is equal to player. So if the tag is equal to player, it'll go to the next level. If it isn't, it'll just continue on as is. So if an enemy were to go over it, and that also had a trigger box collider, it wouldn't do anything. But when the player goes over it, it will go to the next level. So now, when we hit play, should restart the level. So, once again, we're going to make this a prefab. Going to set move it down here. For the prefab, I'm going to just change the position to 0. So if I make a new one, it doesn't always go up there. And save.
How's everyone doing? Everyone keeping up? Any questions? Sweet. Okay. So we got our exit hatch. We got our walls. We can move around, but it's pretty boring. There's not really a lot going on. So now we need to add, we're going to move on to adding enemies and collectibles. So first, let's see. We'll start with the collectible. So we've got a couple here in the Game Boy theme. We've got like the crystal, like that one a lot. But again, you can use whatever image you want. I'm going to drag that in. Set it to, I think you have to call it collectible because my script is garbage and I'm bad. But then you're going to go with scripts. Grab that collectible script. Just throw it on there like we've been doing. Now, where is it? There it is. And now, if we move our character and he collides with the script or the collectible, nothing's going to happen because I forgot the rigid body. Oh, right. Okay. Also, the player character, name it main character. If you want that script to work. The reason that is it's just pretty simple collision. So it's just checking, is this type the main character? You can change that once we get to like scripting and stuff. Make that a little bit better, but for that script to work right now, you just got to make sure your main character is named main character. And then you can walk over and it disappears. Yeah, and then from there you can actually, this is great if you were making your game and you had something like a score, you can keep track of how many times you collided with a collectible like that. Alright, with the collectible done, now we can just start like putting them around the map, making a few of them. Oh, I'll prefab that. Also going to make those static probably better. Dynamic works too, but they'll just move around a little bit. There we go. And they just destroy, and then they're not in the scene anymore. And you can see in your editor that as you're walking over them, they literally are just removed from the scene because they've done their job. The characters pick it up. You can destroy them, and then it's easier. You obviously want to be destroying objects that aren't needed anymore, so it's easier on your scene. But now, no fun getting collectibles if there's nothing trying to stop you from getting collectibles. So, add an enemy. And this also has to be called enemy. There we go. Alright, so then we're going to add the enemy movement script onto the enemy. And then same sort of deal, box collider, rigid body, dynamic, no gravity. And now, so this enemy script has kind of two phases to it. It's either going to go to the player, try to kill them, or it's just going to wander around, gets a little bored, decides to do something else. So we have this seek and wander speed. So the seek speed is how fast he's going to start going to your player, and you can play around with that to make it more balanced. Obviously, higher speed, faster it's going to go. We'll set that to 2. I think our player moves at like 5. Yeah. Set that seek speed to 2, and then our wander speed, maybe put it lower, maybe put it higher so it's more erratic. If it's low right now, then it'll just kind of wander around. So now that we have him set up, he's got those speed variables. He's just gonna hang out. Right. Here's another cool thing you can do is in your scripts, once we get to scripting, you can actually have references to other things in the scene, like used in the script. So right here, for our enemy to know where the player is, it has this player variable, so you can actually take your main character, drag him over to the player variable, and now within the script it can use the player in what it's doing. So it can, instead of trying to like find the player, it can just say, I have the player object, where is he? Oh, right there, I'll go there. So now when we play, he's a quick one. Now, you take that enemy, prefab it. Yeah. Ideally, you have a prefab folder, but yeah, you can just drag and drop it in, and then it'll save it. Prefabs. And then there we go. Oh. Okay. Actually, yeah, let's set up that. Where are they going through? They're going through your walls? Oh, yeah, and importantly, if you touch the enemy, you basically freeze. You can't do anything anymore. Yeah, and that's where you would insert like a game over screen, maybe start the level over again. And now that we've made an enemy, collectible, floor, hatch, player, and wall, we have all the tools we need to make our levels. So now we'll just go into like play around with some of these, try to like design a fun level, and then as Sam was saying, you can set it up so that the hatch will send you to your next level. So now that we have all these, to make a new level, you go to your scenes and create a new scene. Call this level 2. Open that up, and bam, you're back to the blank slate you had before. But now it's going to be way easier. Set everything up. You can just drag all your stuff in, add your players, enemy. Boom. Works. Except the collectible for some reason. Oh, right. There we go. So let's go back to our sample scene. And now that we have this new scene, we can go to our hatch. We'll go to next level. We'll set next level to scene 2. Scene 2. What? Scenes and build. Okay. So you also need to add your scene to the build. I guess. It's kind of funny. I've never had this before. Add a scene and build. Maybe I should just... Okay. I'm not good at my own game. Hey Sam, do you know what this scene 2 couldn't be loaded because it has not been added to the build settings or asset? Yeah, I did that already. Yeah. Do I need to build it? No, it's oh. No, it's just called level 2 in both cases. Also, my laptop is about to die. I guess the charger is not sufficient. That is weird. Is anyone trying it on their? Are they having this problem? Who did this yet?
Yeah, that's why. So go into your hatch and to set it the same.
Oh.
Yep.
That's embarrassing.
You just have to type it in exactly the same. In general, you normally don't want it to be go to the
There we
next
go.
line like that, but it's the simplest way without having you guys worry about programming and whatnot.
So yes, check what things are named. That's a pro game development tip. Years of experience, if there's one thing I've learned. Know what you name things.